Welcome to Spiritual Psychology, and I'm here today with a very dear person in my life, Deb Mangelus, who is an intuitive consultant. She's a brilliant reader and healer. She used to be a psychiatric nurse, no, you were a natal nurse, weren't you?
I was all of those things.
All those things. Deb is many things. And whenever I meet with people, I talk to them a little bit beforehand about what we want to talk about. And Deb has done intuitive work for me for many years now. And we started to talk about her life and a really intense tragedy that happened over the summer of a dear friend of hers that was murdered, and many of the circumstances around that. And Deb is willing to share her own experience to benefit others, which is one of the things that we do as we become mature people. So if you like this video, please subscribe and give us a thumbs up. My name is Renee Lavallee Mckenna, and I am a therapist and shamanic healer myself. So Deb, welcome. It's wonderful to see your beautiful face today.
Nice to see you too, sweetheart.
So tell us what happened with Susie.
So since we were talking about this from an intuitive perspective on some level, I'll give you that whole story. I, on July 1st, had a conversation with my very dear friend, like a sister to me. Her name is Susan Morgan. She was a very visible author, shaman, healer. She had something called Mystic Dream, which was her business. And she did a lot of dream analysis work with people. And she was just an incredible, feisty person. And she actually taught me the difference between sort of an energy worker and a shaman. Because when Susie got fierce about something, she felt very much like a puma or a wild cat. She had that natural world ferocity that came up in her. So we were having a talk on the 1st of July. She was telling me about her life and what was happening for her. And I had a really bad feeling in my stomach. She was living with the man who had been her domestic partner for 3 years. And for the past 2 years, she allowed him to live with her in her home because she felt bad to kick him out, but they had broken up. And she was telling me how he got a little bit more, he had an anger about him. And I said to her, can you please leave that situation? And she said, oh no, he's harmless. And my gut, I said, you read me because I can't read me. I read you because you can't read you. I'm telling you, what do you need? How can I help you do this? She goes, no, it's going to be fine. Her new person that she had fallen in love with was going to come and pick her up. I misunderstood. I thought he was coming on the 4th of July to pick her up. I said, be very careful. That's last time I spoke to Susie. And interesting, I didn't try to call her because I thought she was with her new love. And for that entire week, I'm no lightweight when it comes to the spiritual realm, right? It takes a lot to make me nervous. Yeah. But that whole week I was uncomfortable. I walked in my house and the light that I have 2 bedrooms upstairs. I don't use them unless I have guests or I'm doing something up there. The light in the hallway that I had not left on was on. I walked in the house terrified for no real reason. I was like, oh my God, someone's in my house. They're going to kill me. That is so not me. But it was this enormous overtaking of emotion. Now, I still knew nothing that was going on. I called a friend of mine and said, can you stay on the phone with me while I look in the closets and under the bed? My house was locked, but I had this really uncomfortable feeling. And that whole week, when I was working with clients on the phone, it was almost like I had narcolepsy. All of a sudden I would boom, like get knocked out. And then I'd hear somebody saying, Deb, are you there? And I'm like, what's wrong with me? Finally, Wednesday was the 11th, I think. I went out to dinner with a friend of mine. She said, look, I know you're not really into doctors, but I think you need to go to a doctor because you're gray, you look exhausted, there's something wrong. And I was like, maybe there is something wrong with me. I don't know what's wrong with me. And I went home after dinner, and about 11 o'clock at night, I got a call from a friend of mine, Irene, who also was an acquaintance of Susie's, not a close friend, but she said to me, did you look on Facebook? And I said, no, I try not to do that. And she said, I have to tell you something. Susan Morgan was murdered. And my heart dropped. You know when they say your heart drops? Like, that's actually a visceral thing that happens. My heart dropped. And I said, Bob. I mean, I knew who killed her. It was the completion of that. The strange thing that happened was, in that moment, as soon as that happened, I felt like she came into me. It was the strangest thing. I could see her, I could feel her, I could hear her voice. She was like, I'm right here, Deb. I'm right here, Deb. I could hear her literal voice inside me. And I went into this weird state of bliss. And Irene is on the other end of the phone saying to me, are you okay? Like, you cry at dog food commercials. Like, what's going on with you? And I was like, I don't know, but she's in a really good place. And I could see her. And I saw this, like, she was part Huron Indian. And I could see her, like, with her feet on the earth and her head in the clouds. And it was a whole internal experience, but she was in me, talking to me. And she had, so, I mean, I went through a very interesting.
Oh, no. Okay, you got to come back. Yeah, we're going to have some energetic interference here.
That was weird.
Not really.
Wasn't weird?
No, I'm not surprised.
Oh.
There's a lot going on, and it wreaks havoc with energetics. So what just happened was, in the middle of Deb's story, the phone cut out, and it's not, there's a lot of unresolved energy here.
Right.
And so that's not unusual. So I'm burning some sage right now just to kind of hold the space a little bit. And if you need to keep rejoining, we'll see what happens.
Okay. So I had an entire experience of her, and I went into a bliss state for like 2 weeks. I did not cry. Every time I got near crying, I could hear her in my head going, I'm right here. I'm right here. It's okay. So about 4 days later, I called her son finally, and his wife. And I spoke to them for like 4 hours. And one of the things they asked me was, Susie, at the end of her life, she was very shamanic, but at the end of her life, she had gotten involved with Buddhism. She started to go to a Buddhist temple out there with her friend. And she told me, and Gabe her son reiterated to me, that she had this initiation experience where she was laying in bed, and all of a sudden she saw these two big golden orbs, and they seemed to descend into her, and she went into bliss for a couple of weeks. And her son called his best friend, who happens to be a Buddhist monk who lives in Thailand, and said to him, hey, my mom had this experience. And the Buddhist monk said, that sounds like an initiation, like a bodhisattva initiation. And he's like, really? So concomitantly to that, there were her friend usually entertained the Buddhist monks, right? They would come to her house and she would give them tea and things. And the monk sat at the kitchen table and stood right up and said to her friend, who was sitting in this chair before me? And she said, my friend Susan. And he said, this is bodhisattva energy. You know what bodhisattva is, right?
Explain to people what a bodhisattva is.
Okay, bodhisattva can either be a divine bodhisattva or a human bodhisattva, but it's a being who, when they pass, they choose not to go directly to the light. They stay between heaven and earth to help all sentient beings. So they are a protector, advocate for us. That's what they do. They hang around and help.
Mm-hmm.
So they said it was the bodhisattva energy after she had this initiation. All these strange things were
Mm-hmm.
like happening in separate places.
Mm-hmm.
So the night before Susie passed away, she was speaking to her son on the phone and said to him, I found out that it's really auspicious when you die, if you get shot out of your body instead of dying a slow, protracted death, which I thought was an interesting language she used. And the next day, she was gone. So all of that happened, and we were having this whole discussion. I was having the discussion with her son and daughter-in-law, post her death about this whole bodhisattva experience. So apparently her son had called his best friend, the Buddhist monk, and told him what happened. He said, "You're going to be angry at me, but I'm happy for her." Yeah. That kind of elevated energy cannot be contained in the physical for that long. So
I want to hold for 1 second with that. So our energy just cut out when we lost you for a minute. Do you feel Susie presently?
Yes. I feel her differently than I felt her when she first was with me. Oh, I'm sure she's around.
So there are so many levels to hold, particularly death, but any human experience. And of course, there's the personality level that we hold things on, and just a human level, right? Like, it's a terrible loss, and I'm so sorry for the loss of your friend in this violent way. And yet, we will all die.
Yes.
No one gets out of here alive. How that happens, again, on a personality level, on a human level, we have a lot of attachment to that, and how it should be, or how we would wish for someone to go. But my feeling right now, and I really want to hear what you have to say about it, is that this may be the first of many opportunities for Susie's death experience to be actually a beacon of hope and help
Yes.
to other people who are suffering from traumatic loss. And I too have felt people, the dead, come into me. It doesn't happen very frequently. I now have the capacity to track death through shamanic practices and other Buddhist traditions. We can actually track the spirit of the dead if we want to do that. But it spontaneously have felt it, both in the loss of pets, and we'll talk about Susie's dog, which is how we get into this. And I think many people have that experience, and it's a real experience. It points to there's more going on here than the physical. And when the physical body, the meat suit, dies, there's a continuation of that person. And that in itself, that's real and something that we can experience. And we aren't crazy or making it up, like it's real. Is the first thing I think that's really affirmative to people. But what's really profound here is that we actually don't know what's best for us in our soul's path. And this idea that, or the trajectory of how this has all happened for her to have this next level of enlightenment or expansion or empowerment, experience for her, and then have an opportunity to leave her body so she can do the next level of work as a bodhisattva to be helpful. And I have to say, I feel like that's happening right now in this conversation, that there are people that will listen to this that will be helped by Susie's energy, and they're opening. And to know, I really feel it, like she is available to you, like there is help available to you to grow in wisdom and peace and understanding of this really complex thing that happens for us as humans between birth and death. And that it's not all there is, and that we are always growing and evolving. And one of the most profound ways we can grow is in our ability to help others. And for both of us as helping people, we know that. And for Susie to move into this disembodied place, to be able to be available to so many people, there's a mystery in that. And I want to thank her for being here, and the people that will be helped by this.
Yes, she would. That's what she did. She helped people.
Yeah. And she's doing that right now to bring comfort, to those who are suffering with, perhaps some of the most terrible tragedies that we can go through. And I want to thank you, Deb, for sharing, and being willing to share this tragedy within yourself in this, really open and multi-dimensional way that we can talk about it.
Right. Well, and the work, I have a unique relationship, I think, with death. I've had a lot of loss in my life, but it was just the 11th anniversary of my mother's death. She is as current for me today as she was then. You know what I mean? I have a very different relationship. What was different?
I do, because my mother's anniversary just passed too, and it's been 16 years. And my relationship has improved with her so much since she's been dead. We do so much better since she's been gone than we were able to do when she's alive. She remains an incredibly active teacher for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the difference for this was, it's a strange karma. I don't know what the karma is, but 2 years ago, my two cousins of mine, blood relatives, I grew up with them, but not close to them, were murdered. So I'm like, there's a lot of loss. But for Susie, who was my sister, you know what I mean? She was my spirit. When she came into me, she said, I was your spirit sister. Now I'm your spirit guide. Get your damn book written. She's like on it, right?
Yeah.
But it was because of the anger that, he took, it was so unnecessary in my head. But then this whole bodhisattva thing, when Guy, the Buddhist monk, said to Gabe, you're going to be mad at me, but I'm happy for your mother. So the next morning, now I rarely set an alarm on my phone unless I have to be on a plane at 6 a.m. And you can't set an alarm with a YouTube video. At 6:15 in the morning, the next morning after I had this conversation, I wake up to my phone blaring a song out of nowhere. Now, can you guess what that song was? Are you a Steely Dan fan?
Go for it.
Bodhisattva by Steely Dan was blasting on my phone.
Yeah.
So I looked at it, I'm trying to get my head around it. And I'm like, Susie, really? 6:15? Like, so I immediately text Brenna, who is her daughter-in-law. Yeah, I'm not going to believe this. I just woke up. I didn't set this on my phone. And I tell her about it, and I send her the YouTube video. I don't hear back. Didn't think about it for the rest of the day. 4:15, it's like somebody hits me in the head. You didn't hear back from Brenna yet. So I text her, everybody okay over there? In about 2 minutes, I get back a text message from Brenna. LOL, you're not going to believe this. Gabe is laughing so hard, he fell off the chair. And I'm thinking, well, that's good, because this kid has not been laughing about anything. She writes to me and she says she hadn't seen my text message from the morning because she was running around with her kids. She walked in the door. her husband, Susie's son, was on the phone with Brenna's brother on speaker, and they're talking about the whole bodhisattva thing.
Mm-hmm.
Brenna walks in, the phone dings because I sent her that text. And as she opens the text and her eyes fall on that video, her brother is saying on the phone, "You guys should listen to that song by Steely Dan, Bodhisattva." Like instant synchronicity, right? So they were all cracking up because that's something Susie would do, right? She could be a little bit of a scotch, right? So the sense of it was so profound that she definitely was active and alive and communicating. And they say that spirits, when I lived in Salem, I lived in an apartment that was haunted, and my cell phone could not hold a charge. They say that they'll suck the energy right out of any kind of electrical device that you have. So since then, right, this little dog, that's how we started to talk about this, was Susie's little beloved puppy. And she went through the horror of what happened in that house. 5 hours, flashbangs, tear gas. I mean, and then to see Susie murdered, and then to see the man murder himself. This poor little puppy, and then went to a house with 4 kids, and they were great with her. But interestingly, Susie had lived in that house, and the dog peed in front of the door of the room Susie lived in, nowhere else in the entire house. And they couldn't get her to stop. And they put gates up, but the kids, you got a 3-year-old running through gates. You can't control that. So we did everything. Got her, I actually tried to get her. I have a very good friend who's animal intuitive. She runs a school called Communicate with All Life University. Her name is Joan Ranquette. Tried to get her. She's going to help me when she comes back from Zimbabwe. Do some psychic work with this little Cleo is her name. And we're keeping her name Cleo because Susie gave her that name. But she ended up, they couldn't handle it anymore. So she ended up coming to me. So now she and I are helping each other through that.
Can we see the dog?
Huh?
Can we see Cleo?
Oh, we can see her. She's laying right. Cleo.
Come here, Cleo.
Come here. Oh, come say hello.
There's Cleo. Hi, Cleo.
She's adorable. And she's a real cuddler. And she was a service dog. And she slept for 2 days when she got here. This poor little thing. So that's what's going on here. And that's a total, when I am in the psychic realm all day, every day, most days. So the more you hone that psychic intuitive skill, I think the more profound these experiences happen. Not just synchronicities, the universe talking to us, but, to have a lot of times with the intuitive experience, you don't know until after. It's like that whole sickness I had and upset I had, that was a complete psychic illness I was having, but I didn't know why until I found out. As soon as I found out, my whole body collapsed into it. But, for me, my sister leaves me dimes. My mother, I hear her in my head. You should have put a bay leaf in the stew. You know what I mean? Like I can hear her, my little Sicilian mother. She's still talking to me. And they all are. And the more, I kind of have a foot in both worlds. The more you allow yourself to align with the intuitive capabilities. I've had an interesting insight lately in talking to a client where what I realized was, the image that came to me, the ribbon candy, it's kind of like, I had this feeling like, because we're not trained in our intuitive capacity. Most of us are not. I grew up in it because that's just how the Sicilians communicated, right?
Mhm.
It wasn't taught to me like, this is a thing I'm teaching you. It's just the way life happened around me. But what I realized in talking to this client is there are certain aspects of her intuitive self that are okayed by her mind, right? Like, you know, I teach self-defense, right? And I can't tell you how many people I've talked to who said, oh, I knew not to go down that alley, but I was going to be late. I'm like, well, I was going to be late for meeting. So I went down the alleyway. I never made it to work, right? Because their gut told them no, but their mind overrode it. And I feel like that's what we teach people in this culture. You know, the little kids like, ew, I don't want to kiss Uncle Benny. And we're like, oh, you're
Right.
going to hurt his feelings. Kiss Uncle
Right.
Benny, right? We teach them to ignore their gut. We teach them that other people's feelings are more important than their feelings. And the other people's feelings are imagined feelings, right?
Well, that's not what you and I teach people, because that's my whole work is to teach people to trust their intuition and their body first. That the mind ultimately is a tool to be in service of the greater mystery and wisdom that's deeper and embodied, rather than the leader with its limited information that it's able to receive. You know, there's a beautiful image that someone gave me recently. We can look at our intuition as the feminine and our intellect as the masculine, is often kind of held that way, not about gender, just about these energetic components,
Assertive,
active and receptive, right? And the feminine being receptive and the active being masculine. And it was a picture of Guinevere and Lancelot the knight, and she is standing above him and blessing him with a sword on his shoulder, that he's kneeling in front of her, that he is in service of the masculine, ultimately is in service of the wisdom of the feminine. And that, I mean, that, even as we talk about it's I'm really curious, because not coincidentally, I mean, at this point in my life, nothing is coincidental, right?
Right.
Just paying attention. So it's not coincidental that this morning over coffee, my partner and I are fans of the spiritual teacher Osho, who there's a really amazing documentary on Netflix called Wild Wild Country. And there was murder involved in there, and people went to prison. And ultimately, I just said this morning, he's known by many to be one of the more enlightened beings who has been here in the last century.
Mm-hmm.
And he died, and it seems like he was probably murdered. Gandhi was murdered. And there's a mystery in this. It seems antithetical, right? That, like, you know, Paramahansa Yogananda, but Jesus was murdered, right?
Yeah.
Like what, there's something powerful about this. And that there's a culprit involved, you know, whether it's Judas or Bob or what was her name? I can't think of Osho's general who got them into all kinds of trouble. Ma Ananda. Anyway, yeah, there's a great mystery in violent death and the complexity for all of those characters involved and what their soul journey is.
Right.
In actually, like, if it wasn't Judas and Pontius Pilate, the New Testament and the belief in the forgiveness of sins would not have evolved itself to be, you know, this immense influence. Whether you're Christian or not, it's still an influence on us. And had to come from this violent death. And here we have Susie elevated to bodhisattva and violent death by someone who's not elevated.
Right.
I have to say, I can feel Bob. Yeah. I can feel Bob. I think actually the cutting out, I think it's Bob actually that cut us out, not her. And
yeah.
And he's really, this is one of the really, my experience, and I'd be curious about yours too, is that for many people that commit suicide, it's actually not a relief. It's actually causes them more suffering because of the exponential suffering that they create, and they still didn't get the original work done that they were trying to get done. Now, I can't say that's across the board, but I have definitely seen it that there's another layer of suffering that happens from the regret and the realization of the harm that they've caused, that there's just another layer of work. That's why we get a lot of lifetimes, though. We get, it all comes, ultimately, we're all going to the light. I know that. I don't know how many 100 or 1,000 lifetimes
we all
it takes
are
to get
the light.
We're all but to realize that and to really merge with it, I think that is and we're all in different places with it. What do you think about all that, Deb?
I'm thinking that that quick exit that Susie was talking to her son about, there's something about none of this is real, right? There's a way that we came here to accomplish certain things in our lives. Susie's life and her death are, when Susie was alive, I'm not sure how many people she reached. She had a lot of books. She had thousands of people that she knew. But I was watching, they did a memorial to her on one of these platforms. And there were 475,000 likes on that. And I thought, wow, exponentially, the people that she reached when she was finite and here is X number. But now she's, it's like spreading like wildfire.
Right.
And how, when she came to me that night, she talked to me for a good long time. Like I could see her. She used to have a hybrid wolf named Wolfie. Wolfie passed away just before she got Cleo. And I could see her, with her drum and her shamanic drum and the wolf next to her. But she said to me because I got filled with that bliss, I didn't feel angry at Bob in that moment. You know what I mean? I didn't feel anything like that. And she was very clear. She said he killed himself because he thought he would be with me forever. And that's not going to happen. But she didn't say it in a malicious way or like he deserves that. There was nothing. It was just how it was. And he was like Judas. It's interesting you use that, the facilitation of what her next step was. We didn't know what that step was. This was one of the most psychic, intuitive, powerful people in the world. For her to stay in that house with that man, from what I felt, something else that was purpose driven was happening. That's where the difference between the intellect and the heart, right? Her intellect was telling her she was going to go do this thing and do that thing. Right. And this is how she was going to, follow her drive for purpose in the world. But for some reason, we have to accept. And that's what's hard for me. It's hard for me to accept that he took my friend away. Yeah. That's just the human part of me.
Of course.
But she's with me. I would like to have a cup of tea with her. You know what I mean? Like I could talk to her anytime, that's for sure. But I feel like we don't understand. We come here and we fall asleep, and we plan things. This is what I believe. I believe that consciously we are here to grow our soul. This is what our purpose is, right? So I feel like we make a plan before we come. And the thing that the analogy for me, you know, years ago, I took in a young girl who needed a place to live. When she was 18, and the kid had never been anywhere in the world. So I took her to Disney, and we went to this place called Disney Town, which was a 6-story virtual reality park. And she said to me, "Mama, look at this." She called me Mama. "Mama, look at this. It's a virtual reality roller coaster." So I was like, "Oh," she's like, "You can make your own roller coaster." So she made a reasonable roller coaster. I made like 13 barrel rolls, 14 loop-de-loops. Like, how bad could it be? It's not real. And then I got in that machine, and I got out of that machine green, and thank God there was a garbage pail there. And I thought to myself, this is like incarnation. When we're up there and we know it's not real. So we put in these really intense things, you know. Dolores Cannon, do you know Dolores Cannon? She was a hypnotherapist from years ago, but she said that in heaven, there's lined up around the block for handicapped bodies because it burns so much karma for the soul, plus it burns karma for the people around. Like once we get here, we aren't excited to have a handicapped body. You know what I mean? It's not the mental culture of the planet. But that's what gets you there. So that's what I'm thinking, you know, we make these plans to grow our souls because that's what our purpose is, right? To experience for the divine. And when we get here, we don't like any of what's happening. And it's very real, even though it's not real. Just like that virtual reality roller coaster wasn't real at all. But once I got in there, I was certain it was real. And my body and everything in me reacted as if it was real. So,
like, I think the word real is problematic. We have this conversation a lot. Because I too agree with for me, it came through an understanding of Hindu and Vedic teachings that the divine, the one, the Brahman was having, it's all of consciousness, but it wasn't able to have an experience of itself because you can't have an experience of yourself. There has to be some duality to have an experience. You have to have something, an object and a subject to have an experience. And so the one split into two, Shiva Shakti, the masculine and feminine, to be able to have something to experience of itself. And then it started to do, as it started to divide out more and more, to have more experiences of the 10 billion things, that it did an interesting thing, and it shielded its awareness of itself. So it could actually have an experience without, so it's like hide and seek with ourself, that we're all aspects of the divine. And the experience for me is, that's why we're here, is like you said, to have an experience for the divine. We're all aspects of the divine having an experience. And there are many who would say we get to choose what our experience is, and there is no good and no bad.
right.
That's a different perspective, right? They're like, okay, so do I want to go, if this is like a movie and I want to have an experience, do I want to go to a tragedy or a comedy or a horror flick? Like what do I want? And I know for myself, having lived all of those movies in my own life.
That's what I was saying. I
And
think
now,
we got a little bit of all of that.
yeah. And now in the last third of my life, hoping, you know, to expand my own capacity to have bodhisattva energy, to be able to help others, because I know that's the greatest joy for me, is to be able to help others in the way that I was helped, right? And like yourself, to be willing to share some of my deepest stuff that's in benefit of others. There's a growing experience that happens of that, but now always being present to this, there's like actually growing, certainly on this plane of understanding everything that's happening here. And we continue to have these really profound experiences that are mysteries, that are opportunities for us to grow in our own wisdom and capacity to hold. I think I like the word truth better than the word real.
Yes.
What's true.
Well, real is a subjective,
Yeah, because the idea, like, we are having an experience, and I'm having an experience of this body. It's impermanent. That's another word I think the Buddhists have, really hold that idea, like, of that everything's impermanent. And certainly there's a illusion happening here. We know from atomic physics, right, that actually even this body, if you look at biology, like, it's actually a conglomerate of all kinds. I have 3 trillion cells, or you probably know as a nurse even how many exact cells we have, and each of them has their own intelligence. Like, I'm much more of a cosmos as a body than some unified thing that we call Renee, right, or Deb.
Right.
The deep connection.
And this is only a piece of our reality.
Yes.
It's the one we're focused into. I watched a video last night of a gentleman who had like 3 near-death experiences, had some kind of a massive heart thing. But in one of the near-death, he has a daughter who has Rett syndrome, which is she can't speak. She's like 25 years old, very, very, very differently abled child. And he always felt sorrow about her. And when he was in this near-death experience, he said this beautiful child came toward him, and it was his daughter's energy. And he said to her, she was beautiful and completely whole. And he said to her, "How can I help you? What can I do for you?" And she said, "Just love me." I got to chill when I said that. Just love me. So it was interesting.
Because she's here to help him.
Yes.
Grow in love.
Right. And so he went through this whole story. I'll send you the video. It's actually really fascinating. But he went through this whole story, ended up with a heart transplant. Right. And the heart transplant he ended up getting from a young girl who had taken her own life. And he was talking about the science now of the mind that is in the heart.
Yeah, it's really interesting. My uncle had a heart transplant 15 years ago. Yeah, I just saw him.
And he was talking about how the heart, because the heart is the first thing that develops in the fetus, is the original mind that makes everything else work. And it creates pathways between the heart and the mind. And when you put a new heart in, you have a whole different set of thoughts. And he was saying that this young girl, that all these synchronicities that happened with this young girl who took her life, but her and
gave a life at the same time.
And gave a life.
And gave a life. Yeah.
Right. And he calls his heart Molly after the girl. And he's like, well, Molly loved special needs kids. That's what she was going to school for. Right. And here he has a special needs kid. And his grandmother's name was Molly, and whatever she had, like all of these synchronicities of this young girl that changed his thinking. Like now he goes out, he's still doing the work he's doing, but now he goes out into the world and he talks to people about, suicide, talks to people about, dealing with special needs parenting, it's all, that's part of his experience, but he feels like he's motivated by the energy of that child's heart that he got, right? So he has a 20-year-old heart. So it's fascinating because Joe Dispenza talks about, I've never ever listened to Joe Dispenza till recently. He says something I thought was interesting. Talks about the unconscious, the subconscious is actually the body, right? The physical body, right? That's where you get, your intuition, right?
Yep. Yep.
Because that feeling I had when Irene told me Susie was murdered, that physical heart, like, people say, oh, my heart dropped, sounds like a thing you say. It's a thing that happened.
It's a thing.
I felt
No, absolutely.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I'd never really had that experience before, because I'm always not in my head. I'm always in some other plane of existence, translating spirit into matter. Right. But
It's interesting. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Keep going.
Well, it's interesting because for me, as soon as I heard it, for me, it felt very true that the safest and most empowered place we can be is in our body. That's actually where we're supposed to be. We're supposed to be in our body. And that's what I teach my mentees. And it's how I work with my clients is we can do lots in the non-physical realm. And I too always have, the door is open, wide open. I'm always got half a foot over there listening and feeling.
Right.
But my body here, this is prime real estate to be able to be grounded, and it's a receiver to be able to receive the energy, the information, the spirits of other people. Like, not that we're supposed to, take things in. There's a healthy way to be grounded, and then how do we respond to these experiences? But we have to be in our body in order to be able to feel them. And yet there's also a time to leave the body.
Right.
Right. And how do we as humans make sense of that? I was at a funeral. I had a good friend who passed 2 weeks ago, and I luckily was able to come to California, and I had already had my plane flight, and I was able to go to the service, and it was beautiful. And funerals are so important. Funerals are so important. It's actually quite a tragedy that people don't do funerals a lot of times now. I think it's a disservice to the community, and it's also actually questionable for the spirit of the person, because the funeral, for those who may not pass, and there's a lot of things that can happen after you die, including kind of hanging around and being confused. A funeral can really help give the dead permission to go, and really open, and blessings, and calling in bodhisattvas and Jesus and Mary, or whatever kind of, funeral you have, to really spiritually have them assisted, which some do need. But also the whole community to come around, and really for that person, their spirit, to experience the power of their life in the lives of others. Right. Plus the comfort that we get with each other. And she died like that. We still don't really know what happened. I don't know if they're going to do an autopsy, but quite a few of the people were like, we were just out on Friday night. Like, what the hell happened? Like, her number came up.
Yes.
Time. Boom. That's it. David Hawkins says that the time of our death is predetermined. How it happens is questionable, but the time is predetermined.
Right.
It's why I always tell you, don't tell me what's going to happen.
Yeah,
I don't want to know. One time you made a prophecy, and I was like, don't ever do that again. No, it fucks me up. I can't. I don't want to. Because I'm too easy. I can be very anxious and want to control the future. I'm much better when I'm just present, living as deeply as I can.
Right.
And then if my card comes up, we'll deal with that. I don't want to be thinking about that ahead of time myself. Different people are different.
Well, I think that's why we need to stay in the present moment. Yeah. Right. There is just this moment, right? The Dalai Lama said there's only two places you cannot be. One is the past, and one is the future. Right. So, we're staying in our present moment. We stay out of that worry. That brings us into, like, the other piece of intuition. I feel like the difference between the intuitive sense and the olfactory sense, our five senses, is that it also creates. It's not just a receiver.
Right.
It's also a creative force, right? and what we create around us, if we're not conscious to it, we think, oh, I'm worried that I'm not going to have enough money to pay my rent, or I'm worried that whatever, I'm worried about that. So we spend all this time focusing on worry. What you were saying before, we were talking about that we are here to experience for the divine. We're an extension of the divine, here having a human experience with a divine self, for the divine self. That our job is to experience this. And the universe, the divine, doesn't judge.
No.
In the realm of unconditional love, there's only love, right? There's no room for judgment from the divine. So, people used to say to me when I worked in pediatrics, what kind of a God would let a 9-month-old baby get a brain tumor? And I don't think God makes 9-month-old babies have brain tumors. I'm not really sure. But whatever that purpose was, we're so good, bad, right, wrong judgment that we assume that is a punishment to that child, or the parents, somebody did something wrong to make that thing happen. And, from a different perspective, which would take us a whole nother 10 hours to talk about, is, what purpose did that child come for?
Right.
That soul, who wasn't a baby soul, it was a soul, right? Came into that human form.
And it's having that particular experience. That's its experience. Yes.
Right. And it's having that experience as an extension of the divine. So it's just an experience. The divine doesn't judge that good, bad, right, wrong.
Right.
Right. It's just what happened. That's where we were talking about the mind, the connection, right? The heart, mind, intuition, mind connection. The ego mind is very interested in understanding why this happened, what's going to happen. There's this a good thing that's going to happen. It's a bad thing. I try to stay away from judgment words when I speak, because the world is, because of that unknown, we come here and we fall asleep, right? We forget why we came. So our job is to wake up. Right? We're supposed to wake up and figure it out while we're here. But the awakening is painful. It's, the awakening, like Susie's death's an awakening for me, because what she said to me is, get that book done. How long am I going to wait around? We always think tomorrow's going to be there, but tomorrow might not always be there. Susie just taught me that.
Right. No, and we don't know. And that, for me, as a student of death, and I do feel as a humble student of death.
Yeah.
It is probably our greatest teacher in how to live.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's the danger in the way we as a culture approach death. It's not a part of living for us.
Right.
Everybody wants to be younger. Everybody wants to be, they don't want to be sick. They want to be healthy. They want to send the person off somewhere. If, like hospice care, like death is not to our minds, because we have that judgment about loss. We don't allow death to be as easy a part of life as, say, birth is, right?
Well, I think we wanna, there's a misunderstanding, there's an immaturity, just in our development. I think that's why we're here at the third density. This is still like, we're kind of in kindergarten here, on a soul level. And there's a misunderstanding of this larger context of us actually being a part of something that is infinite and world without end. Amen. Like Susie continues, we continue, and maybe take other forms, or how that works. And so there's this idea of our own self-importance, and that there's a design flaw. Death is not a design flaw. Like this plane of existence is set up perfectly imperfect, and it is a school for the soul, and a consciousness generating machine, as far as I'm concerned. And that is what's happening here. But we've lost many people, and that's really what our work is about, right? Is to grow and help other people to grow in wisdom of understanding of what is happening here. And most of the great traditions point to that, and death is the part of it that we can't get away from. And
Right.
I also have a very unique perspective on death. I rarely consider it a tragedy. Now, certainly there are people suffering. My friend that just died, she has a 17-year-old daughter, a little bit younger than my daughter. They're both waiting to get into college. Like, Mia's suffering right now. And I feel tremendous compassion for Mia's suffering, right? But on a larger scale, the death is, there's going to be all kinds of things that will happen from that will shift the trajectory of her life. Just like already, now we get a choice though in what we do with the information we have, right? And so, like right now, even right now, you are allowing Susie's death to be hopefully a healing experience for other people who might listen to this. Like, so her spirit is moving through. We can see how our, in the 12 steps, one of the promises is that we see how our experience will benefit others. And no matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit us. I know that's been true for me. That's why I've chosen to completely self-reveal. I'm a drug addict, an alcoholic. I used to be a criminal. I have all kinds of like crazy shit that's happened in my life, and a lot of wonderful things too, right? Like, we can share these things, even like this horrible tragedy.
Right.
And yet it can also be a beacon of light. And as you said in the beginning, like, there's this huge mystery that this may be how she needed to die to elevate into bodhisattva form, like Gandhi
Right.
and Osho. Like, whoa.
Right.
We don't know the mystery.
Right. And that's it. You made that wonderful analogy of that sort of, I don't know exactly how you said it, but she needed this, like, if she's meant to be a bodhisattva, or if she elevated to that energy, you made the analogy of Judas, right?
And Jesus,
I always think Judas got a bad rap. You know what I mean? Judas got to be the bad guy. That was his role.
That's a hard role to take.
Right. And then he killed himself after he did it. He didn't want to do that.
Yep.
Right. So
just like Bob.
I feel like
interesting.
Yeah, just like, and he killed himself. Wow. I got a chill when you just said that. Like, I hadn't made that analogy, because he was, because that's what the Buddhist Judas.
Hold on a second.
Hate Judas,
Hold on a second. So once again, we mentioned Bob and it cut out. So you need to say again what you just said, because the internet got really unstable.
Wow, isn't that funny?
Yeah.
Okay, we can stop talking about him. But it's the same thing as Judas.
Yeah.
Judas was chosen by Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And he was the guy that was gonna, what always fascinated me about Judas is he used the intellectual concept. Like, why are you wasting that oil on his feet? We could sell it for 70 silver pieces and feed the poor.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Jesus had the big picture going on. He's like, yeah, the poor will always be with you. You got me for 30 seconds here. You know what I mean? And he, because of whatever his mind was telling him, he ended up doing that deed and getting Jesus killed. And whatever Bob's mind was telling him was what caused him to, he actually, this is a tragedy for those kids as well, because he was like grandpa to the grandchildren. You know what I mean? Like, how do you reconcile that? But with all of the bodhisattva information that was coming in, and that guy said, the monk said, you know, I would be concerned about her because that energy is beyond what the physical body can
hold.
contain.
Right.
That evolutionary level. And then boom, he said the universe colluded.
Right. She had to leave her body.
Her.
It was too much. That's, I mean, many, and particularly in Buddhist traditions, once you reach a certain stage, they just leave their body. That's what they'll say. He left his body. They don't say dead or whatever. You know, he transitioned to the next. I think the last thing, I mean, there's so many layers. It's one of the things I am ever a student of life because of the complexity of any circumstance, is actually from a catalytic standpoint, if we look at the relationship and what little understanding I have of what was happening with Bob and Susie, is that he was in love with her, she wasn't in love with him, but she let him stay and was trying to figure out how to, like, you know, be kind to him. But from an addiction standpoint, she was killed by love addiction, that he killed her as a love addict, that he wasn't going to allow her to move on to be with someone else. He wanted to be with her forever, which is extreme selfishness, right? And the danger of codependency that's under addressed, I would say, that we talk about codependency a lot, and I have watched many people go to prison, and I've seen many people overdose, and I haven't known anyone who has murdered anyone personally, but this is where we're forced, or certainly called by our suffering, to grow or to be destroyed by our own dysfunction, right? And the damage that can do. So there's so many things happening at the same time. I don't know. I felt like
and that it happens designed to multi-layer impact, right? It wasn't just me. I mean, it was her children, it was all the people who loved her. But, you know, then what is the particular, you know, for me, you know, I used to joke, it's not funny, but that I got pretty good at death because of my psychic ability, you know.
Yeah.
I talked to my mother, I talked to my sister, I talked to, you know, my friend Bonnie, like I have tons of people who have passed, but I feel like they're very present for me.
Mm-hmm.
So the education I got from Susie's passing was, this one I couldn't get out of my ego about. Yeah. Like, I found out all that. And if Bob was he was the Judas for Susie to get her to evolve, to transcend.
That's so, I get it.
Yeah.
It's
and
really,
and I'm mad at him. So there's my lesson, right? It's okay if somebody dies of cancer. It's okay if somebody dies from some inevitable exit from the planet that no one can stop. But when somebody did something on purpose to kill my friends, like, I wanted to resurrect him and kill him myself.
Oh,
like,
girl, I'm a hell being, so I can't, you know, I'm with I'm with you. I might be whipping out the 45 trying to find his spirit. And yet, so that's an unhealed part of myself, right? To grow. And how do I grow? We're always called. Deb.
Yeah.
I love you so much.
I love you too.
Yeah.
This is great. We could be on the phone here doing this for hours and hours.
You help so many people, and so many people I love. You help me. It's really, it's a privilege to have you on my text string. And I so deeply appreciate your willingness to share this incredible and deep and painful story, and profound simultaneously.
It's still unfolding. So, and you reflecting it back to me with the, I'm always in me, right? People are like, oh, you're so psychic. Why are you surprised? I don't get that because I can't observe myself, right? I can only observe myself from the reactions of other people. But to be able to, like, for you to say, oh, this is really important. We need to, certainly it's important because, I love my Susie, right? But the reality that you just gave me that actually makes me want to cry is that Susie got to reach all these people because we're talking about her. And I always thought I have to, before all this happened, I'm like, I have to introduce Renee and Susie. You guys would have loved each other. Like the intensity of the two of you, very similar. And, it pisses me off that you can't meet her, but you just did. Right? Yeah. So, and she's around you. And
I'm going to ask her. I'm going to ask her how I can be helpful in her work. Yeah. She may become one of my guides. Yeah.
Oh, I bet she already is. I can hear her in my head. You think it's crazy, but she's like, I would love that. Like, she already loves you.
All right, Susie.
Yeah, you go look at her books.
I will. So we'll link information about Susie's, so you can send me all that stuff. We'll link it in the show notes. Okay. We're going to link how people can get in touch with you. There'll be, so if people want to work with you in your intuitive consulting, people can always, of course, work with me. I have all my links as well. Deb, we're going to have to do this again. There's more for us to talk about. I think there's plenty for us. If we talked every week, we would have been gone in a lifetime. Yeah. We're figuring this stuff out, but thank you. Do me a favor, because you're on an iPhone. I already saw it. Do it. Do you know how to make that heart thing with your hands? Hold it there and watch what happens. Make your fingers go down. Look. Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah. All right. So now you got one. Yeah. Yeah. It's really good. So blessings on your work, blessings on your heart, blessings on Susie's family and all who loved her in our loss. And may Susie's blessings move to all who need them. Yeah. Yeah. She's moving out in the bigger picture. This is great because this gives me an open-hearted feeling to think, oh, I'm angry because I would sit down with a cup of tea in the afternoon and just pick up the phone to call her, and the irritation I had that she is not allowed to do the work but I could just see it even in her grandchildren, because when it first, with the kids, her son told me when this first happened, he kind of collapsed onto his wife's shoulder crying. And because Susie used to sit and teach the kids, they called her Darby. Mm-hmm. Like Ari named her Darby when she was little, because she couldn't say grandma. Mm-hmm. And she went up when her dad was crying. And because Susie they called her every day with their dreams, mm-hmm. She was totally teaching them about spiritual stuff. She went up and she patted her daddy on the leg and she said, "Don't cry, Daddy. Darby's here with us." She told us, yes, she'll always be here with us. It makes me cry because, like, what she instilled in those kids just made me think that's what we're talking about, that will be instilled in other people. They are always with us. They are always with us when we open to the mystery of eternal life. Right. Yeah. Right. Deb. So we'll do this again. All right, sweetheart. Thank you so much for inviting me. And I love you very much. Thank you so much for sharing. And there's nothing more except another heart. There it is. Oh. That is amazing. Yeah. All right, sweetheart. Have a blessed day. You too. Bless you. Bye-bye.